They say summer has a way of pulling things to the surface. The heat, the memories, the feelings you thought you buried deep enough. I guess I should have known something would shift when I agreed to help Theo fix the fence between our properties. I'd lived next to Theo for 3 years, and in that time, we'd developed a quiet rhythm. Shared tools, occasional beers on his porch, and more than a few long glances that I always pretended not to notice. He was the kind of guy who made silence feel less like absence and more like potential. Tall, broad-shouldered, with a laugh that didn't come easily but stuck with you when it did. It started with a knock on my door and his usual sheepish grin. "Fence is leaning worse than my willpower at a barbecue," he said, holding up a crooked slat like it had personally offended him. "You got a few hours?" I said yes too quickly. I always did when it came to Theo. I told myself it was just about the fence. About being a good neighbor. But as I pulled on my work gloves and stepped into the July sun, I knew that wasn't it, not really. My stomach did that annoying little flip it always did around him, and I hated how aware I was of the sweat on the back of my neck, or whether my shirt clung in a flattering way. His backyard was a mess of wild grass and half-finished projects, and it suited him, unpolished but full of intention. He tossed me a hammer without a word, the corner of his mouth twitching up when I caught it one-handed. There were no plans, of course. Just intuition and wood, the two of us figuring it out post by post. Theo worked shirtless, naturally, and I tried not to look. Tried not to notice the way the sun caught the line of his collarbone or how easily he laughed when I dropped a nail and cursed under my breath. I failed on all counts. The thing about unspoken things is they fill the air like humidity, heavy, sticky, impossible to ignore once you start noticing. We worked side by side, arms brushing accidentally, 2 long silences broken by stolen glances. I kept catching myself watching him from the corner of my eye, memorizing the way he wiped sweat from his brow with the back of his wrist or how he squinted at the sun like it had personally inconvenienced him. "Fence is just wood," he said at one point, more to himself than me. "But it keeps things in. Or out." I looked up, but he didn't meet my gaze. Something about that line stuck with me. Like the fence wasn't the only thing leaning. Something was going to give. I just didn't know if it would be the wood or the part of me I'd kept walled off for far too long. Theo moved in the summer after my breakup with Jason. I remember because I was still hauling out boxes of his stuff when Theo's old, rumbling truck pulled up next door. He waved at me from the driver's seat, sunburned and smiling, a shaggy mutt barking in the passenger seat. I waved back and went inside, heart sore and not in the mood to meet anyone new. But Theo didn't leave things there. He knocked the next day with a 6-pack and a toolbox, saying, "Figured you looked like you could use a distraction and your porch light's flickering like it's haunted." That porch light's been working perfectly ever since. We started slowly, borrowing tools, exchanging mail, trading sarcastic comments over the fence. Over time, our conversations moved from property lines to porch beers, then late-night talks about music and family and the weirdness of small-town life. It wasn't flashy or dramatic. It was comfortable. Easy. And that was the thing about Theo, he made everything feel like you didn't have to try so hard to be understood. He wasn't the type to overshare, but he'd offer these little windows into his life, like how he lost his mom young and how he built his own shed because he didn't trust prefab structures. Or how he hated being called Teddy, which his ex used to do just to annoy him. "Do I look like a teddy to you?" he asked once, tossing me a paintbrush when we fixed up his porch last summer. "No," I said, fighting a grin. "You look like you'd knock out a guy who called you that." He laughed and said, "Only if I liked him." Sometimes I think he was testing me with comments like that. Fixing the fence brought us back to that same rhythm. Only this time it felt charged, like we were on the edge of something neither of us could name yet. The sun had started to dip and we still had a full panel to go. I bent to grab more nails when the clouds rolled in like an afterthought. "Shit," Theo muttered, looking up. "You think we can finish this before the sky opens?" "I think you're an optimist with poor timing," I said right as the first fat drop hit my cheek. We scrambled to gather what we could, tossing tools into a wheelbarrow as the rain came down faster than we expected. I was halfway to my back door when Theo shouted, "Shed's closer. Get in." We ducked into the old wooden shed near his garden, laughing and soaked, the scent of earth and cedar pressing in close. It was cramped, dark but dry. Close enough that I could feel the heat off his skin, smell the rain in his hair. He pushed the door closed behind us, the storm now pounding on the roof like a drumbeat. "Well, at least it's not haunted," I said, wiping water from my face. He laughed, leaning back against the wall. "Speak for yourself. I think I saw something move." "Oh, that was just your dignity when you slipped on the grass." He nudged me with his elbow and I nudged him back. But the silence that followed wasn't awkward, It was full. I caught him looking at me, really looking, and I felt my chest tighten. I wanted to say something. Ask him if he ever felt this too, whatever this was. But my mouth stayed shut and I looked away before I gave myself away entirely. The shed smelled like rain-soaked wood and him, something warm and steady. My damp shirt clung to me and I crossed my arms, trying not to shiver or think about how badly I wanted to close the small space between us. He said softly, "You cold?" "A bit," I admitted, more embarrassed than anything. Without a word, he shrugged off his hoodie and handed it over. It was still warm and I swear I could feel the thump of my own pulse in my throat as I slipped it on. "Thanks," I murmured. He nodded, then added, "Looks better on you anyway." I laughed, too quickly, too nervously, and pretended like my stomach hadn't just somersaulted. Outside the rain kept falling. And inside that tiny shed, something else was quietly beginning to grow. The rain didn't let up. What started as a summer drizzle had turned into a full-on storm, dark clouds swallowing the late afternoon light. We stayed huddled in Theo's shed longer than either of us expected, the occasional rumble of thunder reminding us just how stuck we were. "It's not letting up anytime soon," Theo said, peering through a crack in the door. "Yeah," I replied, pretending I wasn't hyper-aware of how close he was standing. "Guess we're prisoners now." "Could be worse," he said with a lopsided grin. "Could be stuck in there alone." I smiled, but it was tight. Because being here with him, trapped in the soft glow of the shed string lights, with the scent of rain and his hoodie clinging to my skin, wasn't exactly comfortable. Not the way it used to be. Not anymore. He leaned back against the workbench, arms crossed, one boot casually tapping against the floorboards. The way he looked at me was different lately. Or maybe I was just noticing it more. Maybe I was the one who'd changed. My hands were still cold despite the hoodie. I tucked them under my arms and stared at a rusted saw hanging on the wall. Anything not to stare at him. "You all right?" he asked after a while. "Yeah. Just thinking. Dangerous habit." I rolled my eyes. "Says the guy who once tried to fix a gutter using duct tape and 2 chopsticks. "That was a calculated risk," he said, laughing. It was a familiar back and forth, the kind of teasing that came naturally to us. But underneath, something tugged at me. A current neither of us could name. The wind howled through the trees outside and the shed creaked around us. Theo stepped closer to shut the side window, brushing past me as he did. Just a light touch, his hand at the small of my back, steadying me. It lasted maybe a second too long. My breath caught. He didn't move away immediately, and when he did, he gave me this look, soft, like he was trying to read something in my face I wasn't ready to let him see. "I used to like storms," I said, voice quieter now. "When I was a kid. My dad would take me out to the porch, say it was nature's way of hitting the reset button." Theo nodded, thoughtful. "Guess we all need that now and then." The storm crackled again, closer this time, and the shed flickered with a brief power surge. I jumped, involuntarily, and Theo reached out, steadying me with a hand on my shoulder. "You okay?" he asked, his voice low. "Yeah," I said, though I wasn't sure if I was. My heart was pounding and I wasn't sure if it was from the thunder or from him. We stood in silence for a while, the rain hammering down, our shoulders nearly touching now. The small space made every breath, every glance feel amplified. Theo broke it with a question I wasn't expecting. "Do you ever think about moving away?" I blinked. "From here?" "Yeah. Just starting over somewhere else." "Sometimes," I admitted. "Why?" He shrugged, but it wasn't casual. His eyes stayed on the ground. "I don't know. Lately I've been thinking a lot about what it would mean to stop waiting for something to change. To just go for it." I didn't know what to say. My mouth felt dry. He glanced up at me then, and for a second, just 1 second, I thought he was going to say it. Whatever it was. But he didn't. He just gave me this half smile that felt more like a question than an answer. I looked away first. The silence stretched again, but this time it wasn't easy. It pressed down on me, thick with all the words I hadn't said. I wanted to reach out, to touch his hand, to close the space that never used to feel so wide. But I didn't. Because what if I was wrong? What if he didn't feel it too? What if I shattered the one thing in my life that felt steady? So I stayed quiet. And the storm kept raging. Eventually, Theo pulled an old blanket from a storage bin in the corner and spread it on the floor. "We might be here a while," he said. "Figure we make ourselves comfortable." I sat down beside him, our shoulders brushing again. Neither of us moved away this time. He reached into the back of the shed and produced a small camping lantern, clicking it on and setting it between us. The soft yellow glow lit up his face, made the freckles on his nose more visible. I'd never noticed them before. Or maybe I had and just hadn't let myself stare. He leaned back, arms behind his head, legs stretched out. Kinda peaceful, isn't it? I nodded, swallowing hard. Yeah, it is. We sat like that for a long while, listening to the rain and not saying what we both probably wanted to. My knee bumped his once and he didn't move it away. He let out a slow breath. I don't mind being stuck here with you, you know? I looked over at him. His eyes met mine and this time he didn't look away. That was the moment something changed. Not loudly, not with fireworks. Just a shift, a quiet click of recognition. Like maybe he was just as afraid, just as unsure. And just maybe he was waiting for me to give him a reason not to be. The storm eventually softened into a gentle drizzle, but neither of us moved to leave the shed. Maybe we didn't want to test the weather. Maybe we didn't want to break whatever had formed between us in the quiet. Theo lay back on the blanket, one hand tucked under his head, eyes fixed on the ceiling beams. I stayed sitting up, knees drawn to my chest, hoodie sleeves pushed over my knuckles. It was getting darker and the lantern cast soft shadows on the wooden walls. Everything about the moment felt suspended, delicate, like a held breath. Did I ever tell you I almost moved last year? I said suddenly, my voice too loud in the hush. Theo glanced over, his brows raised. No. You were gonna leave. I nodded slowly. Yeah. After Jason left, I couldn't stand being in the house. Everything reminded me of him. Even the things he never touched. Why didn't you? His voice was quiet, almost careful. I hesitated. Because I guess something told me not to. Like there was still something here I didn't want to walk away from. Theo turned fully onto his side now, propping his head up on his elbow. Something? Or someone? His tone was teasing, but there was a question buried in it. Something more. I didn't answer right away. My heart started pounding, fast, hard, like it was finally realizing we weren't hiding anymore. I picked at a loose thread on the hem of the blanket and forced a laugh that came out too thin. That obvious? He shrugged, lips curving into a soft smile. I figured it wasn't the climate. I looked at him, then really looked. He wasn't smiling like he was joking. He was watching me the way he sometimes did when he thought I wouldn't notice, like he was trying to memorize something. And maybe I was too tired or too heartsick to keep pretending. I didn't stay because of Jason, I said. Or the job. Or the town. Theo didn't move. I stayed because of you. The words hung there, fragile and terrifying. I half expected him to laugh or pretend he didn't hear me. But he didn't. He just kept looking at me, the air between us stretching thinner and thinner. I know we've been dancing around this, I said, my voice tight. I don't know what I thought would happen, but I couldn't just keep holding it in. Not anymore. He sat up slowly, knees drawn in like mine, our shoulders almost brushing. You really mean that? Yeah. My voice cracked. I do. There was a pause. A long one. The kind that felt like a cliff edge. Theo started, then stopped. He rubbed the back of his neck, glancing down at his knees. Shit. Okay. Can I be honest too? I nodded, my throat dry. I felt something for a while, he said. But I kept telling myself it was nothing. That I was reading too much into it, or that maybe you weren't, interested that way. Or maybe you were still figuring things out after your breakup, and I didn't want to make it harder. You didn't make anything harder, I said quietly. You were the only thing that made it bearable. He looked at me again, and there was something raw in his eyes now. It scared me, he admitted. How easy it was to fall into this with you. How much I looked forward to seeing you. Even when we were just talking about fence posts or arguing about which way the screws should go. I thought if I said something I'd screw it up. Lose you. You're not gonna lose me, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. His hand moved, slow and uncertain, until his fingers were brushing mine. Not a full touch. Just the lightest contact. It was somehow more intimate than anything else. Do you want this? He asked. Like, really want this? Because I do. I want you. But not if it's just because you're lonely or trying to forget someone else. I want you, I said, no hesitation this time. It's not about forgetting anyone. It's about the way I feel when I'm around you. Like I can actually breathe again. His fingers curled around mine then, fully this time. Warm, solid, grounding. I've been waiting to hear you say that, he murmured. I leaned in before I could stop myself. Close enough to see the stubble along his jaw, the curve of his lips, the faint scar at the edge of his brow. He didn't move away. He met me halfway. The kiss was tentative, almost shy. Just a brush of lips, barely a breath between us. But it was enough to set everything in me alight. All the moments I'd imagined this, half asleep, half hoping, couldn't touch how real, how right it felt. He kissed me again, firmer this time, his hand cupping the back of my neck, thumb brushing my jaw. I let myself sink into it, my hands gripping the front of his hoodie like I was afraid the moment might disappear if I let go. When we finally pulled apart, we were both breathing harder than we should have been. "I've wanted to do that for a long time," he said, his voice husky. "Same," I whispered, forehead resting lightly against his. Outside, the rain had nearly stopped, replaced by the gentle chirp of crickets and the last drips falling from the trees. The air was cool and damp, and the world somehow felt new. Theo shifted so we were sitting side by side again, still close, still tangled in each other's space. "So," he said, nudging me gently. "What now?" I smiled, still reeling. "Now we figure it out, I guess. One fence post at a time." He chuckled, then slipped his arm around my shoulders, pulling me into his side. "I can live with that." We stayed like that for a while, wrapped in the warmth of each other and the soft hum of a summer night that had started with a broken fence and ended with something very much unbroken. Something beginning. I don't know what I expected when I walked into his yard earlier that day. But it sure as hell wasn't this. Wasn't him, his honesty, his steady hand, his lips on mine in a thunderstorm-lit shed. Maybe storms really were nature's reset button. Maybe this was ours. We didn't rush to leave the shed even after the rain stopped. There was a kind of peace in the aftermath. The air washed clean, the storm's weight lifted. But more than that, it was us. Sitting there in the quiet, fingers still loosely intertwined, a shared warmth between our bodies that had nothing to do with the hoodie or the blanket. "Guess we're gonna have to actually finish the fence now," Theo said eventually, voice low and amused. "Oh no," I said, mock groaning. "You mean we can't just stay in here forever, pretending to be stranded?" "I mean," he shrugged, looking at me sideways with that familiar grin. "I wouldn't hate it." I nudged his thigh with my knee. "We'd run out of snacks in like an hour. And knowing you, you'd try to cook something on a work lamp. That happened once. And the hot dog almost cooked." We both laughed, and just like that, the tension that had held us hostage for weeks broke into something warmer, something easier. I hadn't realized how much effort it had taken to hide how I felt, how much space it took up in my chest to wonder, to want, to wait. Now every look from him felt different. Like I could let my guard down and just be me. He reached over, ran his thumb lightly along the back of my hand. It was such a simple thing, but it sent a little thrill through me all the same. "You're quiet," he said. "Still freaking out?" "Little bit," I admitted. But not in a bad way. More like, I just keep replaying the last half hour in my head. "Same," he said softly. "I keep thinking, did I really just kiss him? Did he really kiss me back?" "I did," I said, turning toward him. "And I will again. So you don't have to wonder." Theo's smile softened, eyes crinkling at the corners. "That's good. 'Cause I'm not planning on this being a one-time thing." It still felt surreal. That after all the quiet moments, all the unspoken things, we were here, actually here. Not just neighbors, not just friends, something more. He shifted a little closer, resting his chin on my shoulder, his breath warm against my neck. "So, what does this look like now?" I leaned into him, thinking. "Well, we keep fixing fences, obviously. Maybe take a break now and then to make out in sheds." "Solid foundation," he said with a smirk. "But seriously?" I added. "I don't know. I mean, I don't need to define everything right now. I just want to keep choosing this. Every day." He was quiet for a moment, then nodded. "I like that. No pressure. Just seeing where it goes. Together." "Exactly." We sat in silence again, but now it felt settled. Comfortable. Like we'd turned a corner and discovered something that had been waiting for us all along. Outside, the sky was clearing. A soft amber hue stretched across the treetops, golden light filtering through the mist. Everything looked sharper, cleaner. Like the storm had scrubbed the whole world raw and honest. "I think your dog's watching us from the porch," I said, nodding toward the house. Theo squinted, then laughed. "She's judging me. I can feel it." "Well, you did make her sit through weeks of you pining." He turned to me, mock offended. "Me? You were the one sneaking glances every time I bent over." "Yeah, and you kept bending over. Suspiciously often, I might add." Theo grinned. "Guilty as charged." I shook my head, laughing. "God, we're idiots. Idiots in love," he said, then paused, his eyes meeting mine. "Or, at least on our way." Something fluttered in my chest at that. Not fear this time. Not hesitation. Just possibility. "Yeah," I said. "On our way." He kissed me again, softer this time, slower. And when we pulled apart, neither of us looked away. This wasn't some fleeting summer thing. This was the start of something real. something worth holding on to. And as we finally stepped out of the shed into the fading light, hands brushing, heart steady, I knew we'd never be just neighbors again. A week later, the fence was finished. Not just patched but properly rebuilt, each post measured, each slat sanded and sealed. Straight, sturdy, and kind of beautiful in its own quiet way. Theo leaned on one of the new corner posts, wiping sweat off his brow with the hem of his shirt. So, are we professionals now? I tossed the last empty paint can into the bin. Hardly. But I'd say we're above DIY disaster level. He laughed. That's progress. It was hot again, the kind of thick summer heat that clung to your skin and made the cicadas sound louder. But I didn't mind. Not when his hand found mine without fanfare. Not when he laced our fingers together like it was something we'd always done. That was the thing, being with Theo didn't feel like a huge change. It felt like unlocking a door that had been waiting to be opened. We didn't need grand declarations or plans sketched out in ink. Just slow mornings with shared coffee. Quick kisses when one of us passed the other in the hallway. Half-spoken jokes only we understood. The stuff real things were made of. You ever think about how weird it is that we waited so long? I asked, glancing over at him. Theo tilted his head, thinking. Yeah. But I also think, maybe we needed that time. To figure ourselves out. To be ready. I nodded, appreciating how he never rushed his words. How he meant them. He squeezed my hand gently. I don't want to pretend this'll be perfect. I've never done this before, us like this. And I'll probably mess things up sometimes. We both will, I said. But I'd rather mess up with you than try to play it safe with anyone else. He smiled, eyes squinting slightly in the sun. You're such a sap. You kissed me in a thunderstorm. You don't get to call me a sap. He let out a short laugh, then reached into his back pocket and pulled out something small. A crooked nail, slightly rusted, bent in the middle. I raised a brow. That from day one of our fence disaster? Yep, he said, pressing it into my palm. Thought we could keep it. A reminder. Of what? Our lack of construction skills? He stepped closer, that familiar grin tugging at the corner of his mouth. Of where we started. And how we figured it out anyway. I turned the nail over in my hand, strangely touched by the gesture. It was small, maybe even a little silly, but it felt right. Something real to hold on to. We stood there in the sun, the new fence stretching beside us like a quiet witness to everything that had changed. Not just between us but in us. I thought about all the things still ahead, awkward firsts, late-night doubts, laughter in the kitchen, arguments over nothing, falling asleep next to someone who knew exactly how I liked my coffee and when I needed space. It wouldn't all be easy, but it would be ours. Hey, Theo said, brushing his fingers down the side of my arm. You hungry? Always. Good, he said, pulling me gently toward the house. Because I ordered pizza. And I didn't forget the pineapple this time. See, now that's commitment. He glanced back with a wink. Told you. I'm in this. And as we walked back toward the porch, hands still clasped, laughter echoing across the yard, the smell of tomato sauce already in the air, I felt it settle deep in my bones. This wasn't just the end of something quiet and hesitant. It was the beginning of something whole. Something solid. Something that finally felt like home.